In the quiet heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Jonathan Caldwell believed he'd spent a lifetime saving wildlife, until the day a lion named Orion stepped from the shadows to save him. Injured, betrayed, yet bonded by trust, their extraordinary friendship proves even the deepest wounds can heal through courage, forgiveness, and compassion. When Orion roared, it wasn't just a call in the wild. It was an echo of hope powerful enough to mend broken hearts and transform futures forever. Early autumn spread gently across Blue Ridge Sanctuary, nestled deep in the Appalachian foothills of North Carolina. The mornings were growing cooler, a crispness hanging in the air, signaling nature's slow transition toward winter. Mist wrapped softly around the mountain peaks, while the town of Everly, which sat quietly below the sanctuary, woke leisurely beneath the pale golden sunrise. Leaves in brilliant shades of amber, crimson, and bronze whispered as the wind passed through, casting gentle cascades onto roads winding toward the reserve. Jonathan Caldwell rose before dawn, as was his ritual. At 68, Jonathan's sturdy frame had weathered the passing decades admirably. He stood tall, just under 6 feet, broad shoulders still capable of heavy tasks, despite occasional stiffness creeping into his joints. His hair, now mostly silver, retained hints of chestnut at the temples, combed neatly back from a face etched deeply with gentle lines, each telling a story of quiet compassion and lifelong dedication. His clear, thoughtful blue eyes reflected kindness and patience, but behind them lingered a trace of sadness, a shadow cast by years spent witnessing both humanity's cruelty and beauty. His small cabin sat isolated within the sanctuary grounds, rustic yet well-kept, walls of timber logs weathered to a comfortable gray. Inside, it was warmly simple. An old leather armchair worn smooth by years, wooden shelves stacked with faded books on wildlife conservation, framed photos of animals he'd rescued, and the soft crackle of a wood-burning stove. This morning, Jonathan sipped his coffee slowly, savoring the quiet moments before his daily rounds. Outside, the sanctuary stretched into endless acres of protected forest, meadows, and streams. As always, he paused at an old photograph on the mantel, a grainy snapshot from 15 years ago showing a tiny, injured lion cub resting weakly in his arms. He smiled softly, murmuring, "Orion." That memory was vivid. The desperate roar of an injured mother lion, caught in a poacher's trap, the silent heartbreak of discovering her beyond saving. Nearby lay her small cub, eyes barely open, blood staining its golden fur. Jonathan, driven by instinct and compassion, had taken the cub home. Weeks of careful nurturing followed. Nights spent bottle feeding, days treating the animal's wounds until the little lion gained strength. Eventually, he named him Orion after the constellation he'd watched over countless late nights by the cub's side. With heavy reluctance but greater responsibility, Jonathan had released Orion back into the protected wilderness once strong enough. Since then, Orion's survival had become something of a local legend, occasionally reported by visiting researchers. Jonathan never expected Orion to remember him, yet occasionally, when he patrolled alone deep into the sanctuary's core, he felt watched. Not hunted, but watched with a quiet, reassuring presence. He stepped onto his porch as sunlight fully broke over the ridge, rays filtering softly through the towering pines and maples. Pulling on a thick wool jacket, Jonathan made his way toward the sanctuary's main station, a modest building serving as a coordination point for rangers and conservationists. As he arrived, Oliver Grant was already there, leaning casually against his patrol jeep. Oliver was 29, tall and athletic, just an inch taller than Jonathan, with broad shoulders and an air of rugged confidence. His short, messy blonde hair and piercing green eyes matched a personality full of youthful energy, slightly edged with impulsiveness. Though Oliver respected Jonathan, there was always an underlying tension between them, rooted in the tragic past both men shared yet rarely discussed openly. "Morning, Jonathan," Oliver greeted, offering a faint smile tinged with cautious reserve. Morning. Jonathan nodded gently. Early start. Always. Oliver shrugged, eyes glancing away toward distant mountains. A brief silence lingered between them, heavy with unspoken words, before Oliver finally asked, "Checking the southern trails today?" "Yes," Jonathan answered calmly. "Heard some suspicious reports. Better safe than sorry." Oliver shifted, clearly hesitant. "Jonathan, you sure you're up for that route alone? It's pretty rugged terrain." I'm fine," Jonathan interrupted gently, knowing Oliver meant well. "But thanks. I'll radio if I need backup." Oliver watched him for a moment, conflicting emotions passing briefly over his face. "Be careful, okay?" he finally murmured, his tone softening. Jonathan smiled warmly, acknowledging Oliver's concern with silent gratitude. He climbed into his aging pickup, the engine roaring reliably to life. He waved briefly before heading deeper into the sanctuary, leaving Oliver staring after him thoughtfully, a complicated expression shading his eyes. Jonathan slowly navigated the familiar trails, rugged tires crunching over gravel paths and uneven terrain. The sun climbed steadily higher, warming the cool morning air. He kept watchful eyes scanning carefully, alert for any signs of trouble, injured wildlife, poacher tracks, anything out of place. Hours passed quietly, birds singing softly in the dense trees overhead. Eventually, he reached a remote clearing near the sanctuary's southern boundary, pausing briefly to stretch stiff muscles. A sudden rustle in thick brush nearby snapped his attention, fully alert. His heart skipped momentarily before a powerful, yet quiet presence stepped cautiously into the open. Jonathan froze in astonishment. Orion stood majestically just yards away, his golden mane glowing in sunlight, impressive and fully matured. The lion was powerful, muscular, scarred from years of survival, with an unmistakable pale line on his left flank, the lasting reminder of that long-ago wound. Deep amber eyes gazed intently into Jonathan's, recognition and silent respect bridging the gap of years instantly. A gentle smile crossed Jonathan's lips, his voice soft with emotion. "Hey there, Orion. It's been a long time, my friend." Orion tilted his large head slightly, ears twitching forward in curious acknowledgement. Slowly, the lion approached a few steps closer, stopping short at a respectful distance. Both man and animal stood quietly, sharing this remarkable moment of silent reunion, memory, and understanding filling the space between them. After long seconds, Orion turned slowly back toward the thick forest, his powerful stride calm and unhurried. Jonathan watched the majestic creature disappear once more into shadows, leaving him profoundly moved. Returning to his truck, Jonathan felt strangely reassured. The encounter had stirred old memories and new hope, affirming decades of devotion he'd given to the sanctuary. Despite the aches of age and quiet shadows of regret, he knew the mountains would always be his home, these animals his family, and their safety his unwavering purpose. As he drove slowly back toward the main station, Oliver Grant's image came briefly to mind. Jonathan understood Oliver's resentment. It was painful but justified. Yet perhaps, like Orion, even deep wounds could heal, given patience, time, and gentle understanding. A faint optimism stirred within Jonathan. Maybe Oliver, like Orion, was finally ready for reconciliation. Jonathan smiled softly, the afternoon sun casting comforting warmth upon his face. Today had reminded him vividly of his purpose, re-energizing his heart with clarity and resolve. He would continue protecting this land, these creatures, and maybe, just maybe, guide Oliver toward the healing they both deeply deserved. Oliver Grant had always been drawn to the mountains, the way their rugged peaks jutted into the sky, both intimidating and reassuring. The sanctuary's dense forests and winding trails reminded him constantly of his father, Jackson Grant, a revered ranger who had spent his life protecting these very lands. Oliver had inherited his father's height and build, lean and athletic, standing just over 6 feet, with sandy blonde hair that seemed perpetually tousled. His piercing green eyes often glinted with intensity, a trait that both attracted others and subtly pushed them away. Yet beneath the tough exterior lay a heart marked deeply by loss. This afternoon, Oliver stood at the edge of a steep overlook, gazing across the expanse of Blue Ridge Sanctuary. A soft drizzle had begun to fall, mingling gently with the autumn leaves scattered along the path. The mist hugged the hills, lending the landscape an ethereal beauty, but Oliver barely noticed. His mind was elsewhere, lost in memories he couldn't shake. Jackson Grant had been the ideal ranger, steadfast, brave, respected by all who knew him. Oliver could still vividly recall his father's firm hand on his shoulder, teaching him how to track wildlife, read signs left on the forest floor, or carefully dismantle traps left by poachers. Those lessons shaped Oliver, molding him into a ranger respected for his skills, yet known for his impulsiveness. The two traits often clashed, causing friction with his peers, and especially with Jonathan Caldwell, his father's closest friend. Oliver's resentment toward Jonathan ran deep, tangled in grief and misunderstanding. Jonathan had been there when Jackson died, a fact Oliver could never quite forgive. The official story had been a tragic accident, a storm, a fallen tree branch, unavoidable circumstances, but Oliver couldn't silence the nagging doubts. In the depths of his pain, he blamed Jonathan for failing to protect his father. Each interaction with Jonathan reignited a quiet fire of accusation, even though part of Oliver desperately wanted to let go of that bitterness. A low growl nearby snapped Oliver back to the present. He turned sharply, hand instinctively reaching for the tranquilizer pistol at his belt, only to relax when he saw a familiar figure emerging from the trail below. It was Laura Bennett, the sanctuary's veterinarian. Laura was petite, standing no taller than 5'3", yet carried herself with confidence and compassion that far exceeded her small stature. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her eyes, a calm shade of gray-blue, studied Oliver cautiously. Laura had a gentle but firm demeanor, tempered by countless hours spent caring for injured animals. She wore practical khaki clothing, her jacket stained slightly from the morning's work. Beside her walked a young intern named Evan Clark, a college student studying wildlife biology. Evan was lanky, with messy brown hair and a cheerful, slightly awkward demeanor. Though eager to learn, his youthful exuberance sometimes bordered on clumsiness, making him an affectionate annoyance around the sanctuary. "Hey, Oliver," Laura greeted warmly, her voice soft yet clear. "We've been looking for you." Evan here spotted a few traps set near the eastern boundary. Oliver's jaw tightened reflexively. Poachers were becoming an increasingly frustrating problem. "Lead the way," he responded tersely. As they walked, Evan rambled excitedly, describing the traps he had discovered. "I saw wires hidden beneath the leaves. Nearly stepped right into one," Evan exclaimed, eyes wide with youthful astonishment. Oliver nodded absently, attention drifting back to his internal turmoil. Laura observed him quietly, sensing his distraction but choosing not to press. She had known Oliver long enough to recognize when his grief resurfaced. Laura had always respected Jackson Grant deeply, and she understood Oliver's bitterness more than he realized. They reached the traps, crude, dangerous snares concealed expertly under fallen leaves and brush. Oliver crouched down, examining them carefully. His jaw clenched again, this time with barely contained anger. "Whoever set these knows what they're doing," Oliver murmured darkly. Laura gently placed her hand on his shoulder, grounding him with a touch of reassurance. "We'll get them," she said softly, eyes holding his until he reluctantly met her gaze. Her empathy was a balm, and Oliver relaxed slightly under her calming presence. He appreciated Laura more than he ever openly admitted. Her quiet strength often helped him refocus when his emotions threatened to overwhelm him. Suddenly, Evan called from further ahead, excitement edged with worry in his voice. "There's another trap over here, and something's caught." Oliver and Laura rushed forward, hearts racing. There, tangled in a painful snare, lay a young bobcat, its spotted fur dirty and matted with blood, eyes wide with terror. Laura quickly took control, her veterinarian instincts kicking in instantly. "Oliver, steady it carefully. Evan, fetch my kit from the Jeep fast." Oliver carefully approached the bobcat, speaking soothingly even as his heart hammered with concern. He expertly restrained the animal, avoiding the sharp claws desperately flailing. Laura's calm voice whispered reassurance to the bobcat as she skillfully administered a mild sedative and began cutting away the trap's brutal wires. Watching Laura work with precise efficiency, Oliver felt a sudden pang of admiration, a gentleness that momentarily softened the edges of his heartache. The bobcat gradually relaxed, its breathing calming under Laura's careful hands. Evan returned breathlessly, handing Laura bandages and antiseptics, clearly awestruck by the scene. Once free, Laura wrapped the bobcat gently in a blanket, carefully cradling it. "He'll survive," she whispered quietly, relief visible in her eyes. Oliver exhaled deeply, tension easing from his muscles. "Good job," he said, sincerely impressed. The three made their way back toward the sanctuary's medical cabin, where the injured animal could be properly cared for. As they walked, Oliver lingered beside Laura, silence stretching comfortably between them. Finally, Laura spoke softly. "Oliver, you should talk to Jonathan. Really talk to him." He tensed instinctively, but her gentle tone broke through his defenses. "I don't know if I can," he admitted quietly, vulnerability flickering briefly in his eyes. She paused, turning to face him fully. "Your father wouldn't want you holding on to this anger forever," she said gently. "Jonathan loved Jackson too, maybe more than anyone." Oliver looked away, conflicting emotions evident. Her words stung with painful truth. He knew deep down that she was right, but accepting it felt nearly impossible. The burden of his grief had become familiar, strangely comforting in its heaviness. As they reached the cabin, Evan took the bobcat inside, leaving Laura and Oliver alone once more. She gently touched his arm again. "Just think about it," she whispered. Oliver met her steady gaze, feeling his walls briefly waver. "I'll try," he murmured, sincerity faint but genuine. It wasn't much, but Laura recognized it as progress. She smiled softly, understanding clear in her eyes. "That's all anyone can ask." As Oliver watched her disappear into the cabin, he felt an unexpected sense of calm, a small sliver of light piercing through the shadows he'd carried for so long. Laura's compassion was a powerful force, one that slowly began chipping away at his hardened heart. Perhaps, Oliver thought reluctantly, the time had finally come to confront Jonathan, not with blame or accusation, but with openness, something he'd avoided far too long. Jonathan Caldwell moved quietly along the winding trails of Blue Ridge Sanctuary. Autumn now fully settled into the landscape. The leaves, once fiery reds and oranges, were beginning to fade to muted browns, crunching softly beneath his sturdy boots. A thin veil of mist lingered, caressing the forest floor, making the sanctuary feel like an enchanted place caught between seasons. Jonathan paused, leaning against a moss-covered oak, his breath forming gentle clouds in the crisp morning air. At 68, Jonathan's strength had waned slightly, yet his spirit remained unwaveringly committed to the sanctuary's protection. But today, a strange heaviness rested in his chest, something he'd stubbornly ignored as mere fatigue. Despite the warning signs, Jonathan continued his patrol deeper into the sanctuary's remote southern boundaries, his focus unwavering. As he navigated the thickening underbrush, the discomfort intensified, evolving into sharp pangs that clutched painfully at his heart. He halted, steadying himself against a fallen log, beads of cold sweat forming on his forehead. Suddenly, the forest around him spun in slow, surreal motion. His knees buckled, and he fell heavily onto the damp leaves, gasping for breath, pain radiating across his chest. He tried to call out, but his voice emerged as little more than a faint whisper, carried away by the indifferent breeze. In the dense shadows nearby, Orion, the powerful lion once saved by Jonathan, lifted his head, ears twitching alertly. Orion, now fully grown into a magnificent animal with a thick golden mane, bore a distinct pale scar on his flank from that distant rescue. Though Orion lived freely and kept his distance, he had never forgotten Jonathan. Alerted by the unusual sounds, Orion padded quietly through the undergrowth toward the fallen ranger, amber eyes wide with concern. Jonathan's vision blurred, consciousness wavering on the edge. He saw a massive shape approach slowly through the haze, recognition dawning slowly. Orion. The great lion approached cautiously, sniffing gently near Jonathan's fallen body, then lifted his massive head and roared, a deep, powerful sound resonating through the forest, carrying far beyond the trees. Not far away, Oliver Grant was standing beside his Jeep with Laura Bennett, discussing recent poacher sightings. Laura's gentle but resolute demeanor contrasted sharply with Oliver's restless intensity, as their recent experience rescuing the young bobcat had drawn them closer. Hearing the distant roar, Oliver stiffened instantly, eyes narrowing. "That sounded close," Laura said anxiously, her petite frame tensed in alertness. "And desperate." Oliver nodded sharply, heart pounding. "It's Orion," he murmured, recognizing the distinct timbre of the lion's voice. Without hesitation, he jumped into the Jeep, Laura swiftly joining him. They drove quickly down rugged trails toward the sound's source, urgency gripping them tightly. Upon reaching the clearing, Oliver froze at the sight. Jonathan sprawled unconscious, Orion standing protectively nearby. For a brief moment, tension crackled in the air as man and lion locked eyes. Then Orion slowly stepped back, allowing Oliver and Laura to approach. Laura immediately took charge, kneeling beside Jonathan. She pressed 2 fingers against his neck, face tightening with concern. "His pulse is weak, irregular," she murmured urgently, retrieving a small emergency medical kit from her backpack. Oliver knelt opposite her, anxiety flooding his features, resentment temporarily overshadowed by genuine fear. "Jonathan, stay with us," Oliver pleaded softly, voice trembling. The bitterness he'd carried for so long momentarily forgotten, replaced by raw vulnerability as memories of losing his father resurfaced vividly. Laura administered emergency aid swiftly, stabilizing Jonathan as best she could. "We need to move him now," she said firmly. Oliver nodded, lifting Jonathan carefully into the Jeep, muscles straining as adrenaline surged through him. Orion watched silently, amber eyes filled with a deep, mournful understanding as the vehicle sped away, disappearing into the trees. Upon arriving at the sanctuary's medical cabin, Laura was met by Dr. Margaret Harper, a seasoned local physician in her mid-60s. Margaret was tall and slender, with silver-streaked dark hair meticulously pulled into a neat bun, her sharp hazel eyes radiating calm authority. Known for her stern yet compassionate approach, Margaret had been caring for sanctuary staff for decades, deeply respected by everyone who knew her. She swiftly took over, examining Jonathan with practiced efficiency. "It's a serious heart attack," Margaret confirmed gravely, directing Oliver to assist her in administering life-saving measures. "He'll need hospitalization immediately, but we must stabilize him first." Oliver, hands trembling slightly, followed her instructions precisely, emotions chaotically blending fear and lingering guilt. As they worked side by side, Margaret offered quiet reassurance, sensing Oliver's turmoil. "Jonathan's strong," she said softly. "He won't leave us easily." Outside, Laura paced anxiously, eyes frequently darting toward the woods, unable to shake the haunting image of Orion standing vigil beside Jonathan. She wondered if the lion somehow understood the severity of what had happened, sensing Orion's attachment to the man who once saved him. After tense minutes, Jonathan's breathing steadied, color slowly returning to his pale features. Margaret exhaled deeply, nodding with cautious relief. "He's stable for now. We'll move him to the hospital immediately." Oliver stood shakily, shoulders sagging with relief, yet burdened by an overwhelming wave of guilt. Margaret placed a comforting hand on his arm, her gaze gentle yet penetrating. "You did well, Oliver," she murmured softly. "Your father would be proud." Those words, quietly powerful, resonated deeply within Oliver, stirring emotions long buried beneath anger and blame. His throat tightened painfully. I blamed him for so long," he admitted hoarsely, eyes shining with unshed tears. Margaret regarded him compassionately, squeezing his arm reassuringly. "We all make mistakes, Oliver. It's never too late to heal old wounds." As Jonathan was carefully transported into an ambulance, Oliver stood alone momentarily, lost in thought. Laura approached silently, sensing his inner struggle, gently touching his shoulder. Oliver turned slowly, meeting her empathetic gaze. "I almost lost him," he whispered, voice thick with remorse. Laura nodded softly, understanding fully. "But you didn't. Jonathan's alive. You can still mend things." Oliver exhaled deeply, finally accepting the truth he'd avoided for years. Jonathan had loved his father as deeply as Oliver himself. Their shared grief had become a barrier, one Oliver now felt ready, finally, to dismantle. That evening, as twilight descended gently upon the sanctuary, Oliver returned to the clearing where Jonathan had fallen. To his quiet astonishment, Orion was waiting, sitting regally as though expecting him. Oliver approached slowly, heart hammering nervously. The lion regarded him silently, amber eyes wise and deep, holding countless secrets of survival and compassion. "Thank you," Oliver whispered sincerely, feeling strangely comforted by Orion's quiet presence. Orion blinked slowly, a gesture of calm acknowledgement, before turning and disappearing gracefully into the darkening forest. Oliver stood quietly for several long moments, absorbing everything the day had taught him about forgiveness, strength, and the unbreakable bonds forged through compassion. Jonathan had risked everything once to save Orion, and today Orion had returned the favor, uniting two men who desperately needed each other's forgiveness. Determined, Oliver resolved to confront his past openly. He would speak honestly to Jonathan when he recovered, determined finally to heal the rift between them, guided now by a whisper from the past that spoke not of blame, but of hope. The late autumn sun painted the Blue Ridge sanctuary in gentle amber tones, leaves drifting lazily to carpet the ground in rich hues of crimson and gold. Jonathan Caldwell sat in a wicker chair on his porch, wrapped warmly in a thick woolen blanket, gazing out at the familiar scenery. His body, though gradually healing, felt frilier, his usually broad shoulders hunched slightly forward from lingering weakness. The once vibrant ranger's hair was now almost completely silver, emphasizing the softness in his blue eyes that still sparkled with gentle resilience despite the shadows beneath them. Beside him, Oliver Grant stood silently, his tall, lean frame strong and steady, though now softened by compassion rather than rigid resentment. Oliver's sandy blonde hair caught the sunlight, and his thoughtful green eyes were gentle, attentive, reflecting the quiet transformation he'd undergone. Their silences had shifted from tense to comfortable, marked by mutual respect and understanding. Jonathan cleared his throat softly. "Oliver," he began, voice warm yet hesitant, "there's something else you need to know about your father, something I haven't fully shared yet." Oliver turned quickly, a flicker of anxiety crossing his face. "What is it, Jonathan?" Jonathan's gaze dropped briefly before meeting Oliver's once more. "Jackson didn't just die protecting me. Before he passed, he asked me to promise him something, to look after you if anything happened. I've spent all these years trying to fulfill that promise quietly, though I feared you'd never accept it." Oliver took a step back, clearly shaken. "You never mentioned that." Jonathan nodded gently. "I couldn't find the right moment, and then the resentment grew between us. But your father trusted me implicitly, Oliver. He knew the risks, and his last thoughts were of your well-being. His sacrifice wasn't just about saving my life. It was to ensure I could watch over yours. Oliver stood silently, visibly processing this revelation, his eyes shining with suppressed emotion. I've spent so much time blaming you, Jonathan, he finally admitted softly. I was blinded by grief. My father would be ashamed of my anger. Jonathan reached out and clasped Oliver's shoulder reassuringly. Your father was proud of you, Oliver. He would be even prouder seeing the man you become now. Forgiveness is harder than anger, but you've managed it. Outside the porch railing, Orion sat quietly beneath a sprawling oak tree. The majestic lion's golden mane shimmered softly in the sunlight, amber eyes carefully watching Jonathan with attentive concern. Orion had become increasingly protective, often lingering nearby as though sensing Jonathan's frailty. His presence, comforting yet wild, had become a constant reminder of the sanctuary's deeper bonds. Watching Orion from a short distance away, Evan Clark sat cross-legged on a small patch of grass, his worn sketchbook open on his lap. Evan, 22 and lanky, pushed his glasses back up his nose absently, scribbling fervently. His messy dark hair stuck out at odd angles, and a perpetual, boyish curiosity brightened his brown eyes. Orion fascinated Evan profoundly, the lion's quiet devotion becoming a recurring subject in his art. A soft voice interrupted Evan's concentration. You seem captivated by that lion. He glanced up, startled, to see a new face standing nearby. The woman smiled gently, her expression curious yet friendly. I'm Rebecca Palmer, from the State Wildlife Commission. Jonathan requested someone to come out and document Orion's unusual presence here. Rebecca was in her mid-30s, tall and poised, with straight chestnut hair falling neatly around her shoulders. Her eyes were a deep emerald green, filled with intelligence and empathy that matched her calm, professional demeanor. Her practical outdoor clothing, khaki jacket and durable boots, emphasized her experience, but the genuine warmth in her smile hinted at deeper compassion beneath her official exterior. Oh, hi, Evan responded shyly, fumbling slightly as he closed his sketchbook. I'm Evan Clark, just an intern. Orion's story is truly incredible. He and Jonathan share a bond one can't quite capture in drawings. Rebecca knelt beside Evan, intrigued, studying Orion carefully. It's rare indeed. I've seen many remarkable animal behaviors, but this level of devotion is extraordinary. How often does Orion stay close like this? Almost constantly lately, Evan replied thoughtfully, especially since Jonathan's illness. Rebecca nodded quietly, scribbling notes in a small field notebook. Animals sense vulnerability instinctively. Orion clearly sees himself as Jonathan's protector. Nearby, Laura Bennett approached Oliver quietly. Petite, gentle, with soft brown hair framing a kind face that always carried calm reassurance. Laura's presence had become essential to Oliver's emotional journey. Today, her expression held quiet pride as she noted Oliver's relaxed posture. You look lighter today, she observed softly, touching his arm gently. Oliver smiled, glancing toward Jonathan. Learning the whole truth about my father changed everything, Laura. I feel like I can finally breathe again. Laura's eyes softened affectionately. I always knew you could find peace. You just needed time. Oliver met her gaze warmly, gratitude clear in his expression. Their connection had deepened slowly, naturally, becoming something profound neither had initially anticipated. Later that afternoon, as the sun sank lower, casting deeper shadows across the sanctuary, Jonathan watched Orion carefully from his porch. Evan and Rebecca had wandered off, discussing wildlife documentation eagerly. Oliver and Laura had moved inside to prepare dinner, laughter occasionally drifting gently from the cabin. Jonathan spoke softly toward Orion, the lion's amber eyes meeting his steadily. You don't need to stay, my friend. I'm safe now. You fulfilled your duty to me. Orion stood gracefully, padding closer until he was mere feet away, powerful frame emanating quiet strength. Slowly, deliberately, Orion lay down again, chin resting gently on massive paws, eyes still locked onto Jonathan's with unwavering resolve. Jonathan smiled tenderly, understanding Orion's silent message. You've chosen this. I accept it gratefully. Behind him, Oliver stepped quietly onto the porch, placing a gentle hand on Jonathan's shoulder. Jonathan turned, meeting Oliver's warm gaze, an unspoken understanding passing between them. He won't leave you, Oliver whispered knowingly. Just like we won't leave each other again. Jonathan's heart swelled with quiet happiness. The threads binding him, Oliver, Laura, and Orion had grown stronger through trials, misunderstandings, forgiveness, and compassion. He knew now those bonds were unbreakable, forming an intricate tapestry of trust and loyalty he would cherish forever. As twilight enveloped the sanctuary softly, Oliver leaned down to speak quietly beside Jonathan. I finally understand what my father knew all along. There's strength in forgiveness. Jonathan nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Jackson would be proud of us both. They sat quietly together, Orion's serene presence reassuring nearby, their hearts finally at peace, connected by a shared history of loss, understanding, and profound healing. Darkness had barely retreated when the stillness of the Blue Ridge sanctuary shattered violently. A gunshot cracked sharply through the cold pre-dawn air, startling birds into a panicked flight, their wings whispering frantically among the branches. Jonathan Caldwell, sleeping lightly in his modest cabin, sat upright abruptly, his heart pounding erratically beneath his frail chest. His pale features tightened in immediate dread. Though weakened, he forced himself upright, his silver hair disheveled, eyes wide with alarm as he stared toward the distant woods shrouded in lingering darkness. Outside, Orion had already risen, the majestic lion standing rigidly alert near the cabin, amber eyes fixed unwaveringly toward the sound's direction. His muscular frame tensed, tail swishing with measured agitation. Without hesitation, Orion moved silently into the woods, driven by an instinctive need to protect. Further away, Oliver Grant and Laura Bennett were already hurrying toward the source of the sound, having stayed late the night before to ensure Jonathan's comfort. Oliver's sandy blonde hair was tousled from sleep, but his green eyes were intensely focused, adrenaline sharpening his movements. Laura kept pace beside him, her petite frame determined, her soft brown hair secured hastily in a tight ponytail, gray-blue eyes wide with concern. As they ran along the narrow path, they met Evan Clark stumbling anxiously toward them. Evan's usually cheerful face was pale with fear, his lanky frame trembling, dark hair matted with sweat beneath his slipping glasses. Gunshots. I saw flashlights near the southern perimeter. Evan stammered breathlessly, eyes wide behind his glasses. Oliver gripped Evan's shoulder reassuringly. Get Jonathan and stay with him. We'll handle this. Evan nodded nervously, turning swiftly back toward the cabin. Oliver and Laura pressed forward urgently, reaching a clearing littered with signs of intrusion, trampled foliage, freshly broken branches. Harsh voices echoed nearby, angry and demanding. From their hiding place behind dense underbrush, Oliver spotted 3 figures moving aggressively through the trees, rifles gleaming ominously in the weak dawn light. The apparent leader, a tall, burly man named Ray Jenkins, wore a tattered camouflage jacket, thick black beard obscuring a hard face lined by years of poaching. Beside him stood his younger brother, Tom Jenkins, shorter and wiry, with narrow, calculating eyes beneath greasy brown hair. The third, a quiet, nervous-looking man named Mitch, lingered anxiously behind, his lanky frame hunched uncertainly, glancing nervously around. Ray's gravelly voice cut through the tense air. We're close. Keep moving quietly. The old ranger's place is just ahead. Should have plenty worth our trouble. Oliver's blood boiled, anger flaring fiercely as he recognized the threat directed toward Jonathan. Laura touched his arm gently, cautioning patience, eyes silently urging careful strategy rather than reckless action. Suddenly, a fierce roar erupted close by, resonating powerfully through the forest. Orion had found them. Oliver watched, breathless, as the lion emerged boldly into view, his magnificent golden coat rippling with strength, amber eyes burning fiercely. Ray shouted in surprise, leveling his rifle hastily. Another shot rang out, and Orion staggered slightly, a painful snarl escaping his lips. A wound opened along Orion's powerful shoulder, dark blood staining his golden fur vividly. "No!" Oliver gasped, instinctively surging forward, driven by protective fury. Laura followed instantly, both abandoning caution as they rushed into the open. "Drop your weapons!" Oliver shouted sharply, voice vibrating with restrained anger. Ray spun, eyes narrowing dangerously. "Stay out of this, kid," he growled threateningly, rifle aimed steadily. Oliver stood resolutely between the poachers and Orion, unwavering despite fear twisting sharply within him. "You're trespassing. You've already hurt an animal. Leave now, or face the consequences." Behind Ray, Mitch shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting uncertainly, courage faltering visibly. Laura seized the moment, speaking directly to Mitch, her calm voice firm yet gentle. "You don't want this trouble. Think clearly." Mitch hesitated visibly, looking anxiously at Ray, doubt clouding his eyes. "Maybe she's right, Ray. This isn't worth prison." Ray's expression darkened furiously, barking harshly at his brother. "Shut him up, Tom." Tom stepped aggressively toward Mitch, tension thickening dangerously. In the distraction, Orion struggled to stand, growling weakly yet defiantly. Oliver rushed protectively to the lion's side, placing himself firmly between Orion and further harm. Suddenly, footsteps crashed urgently through nearby brush, and Evan appeared, followed closely by Rebecca Palmer, the wildlife official from the State Commission. Rebecca's chestnut hair was tied back, eyes flashing sharply, radiating authority despite her slender frame. She raised her voice, clear and powerful. "This area is under state protection. Drop your weapons immediately." Ray's eyes widened, resolve wavering finally under official scrutiny. Mitch dropped his rifle first, stepping back anxiously, followed reluctantly by Tom. Ray snarled angrily, spitting curses under his breath, yet surrendered bitterly, his rifle hitting the forest floor heavily. Oliver and Laura immediately knelt beside Orion, whose breathing was labored but steady. Laura swiftly examined the lion's wound, gently cleaning and bandaging it with practiced precision. Orion gazed weakly at Oliver, amber eyes filled with quiet gratitude and trust. "You're going to be all right, Orion," Oliver whispered softly, gently stroking the lion's mane, finally comprehending the profound depth of Orion's loyalty to Jonathan. Orion had deliberately placed himself in harm's way, driven purely by his devotion to the man who had once saved him. As law enforcement arrived swiftly to escort the poachers away, Jonathan appeared slowly, leaning heavily on Evan for support. His face paled further upon seeing Orion wounded, eyes welling with emotion. "Jonathan," Oliver said quietly, voice thick with reverence, "he risked everything for you." Jonathan knelt slowly beside Orion, placing a trembling hand tenderly on the lion's powerful neck. "He always has," Jonathan murmured hoarsely, tears glistening quietly. "From the day we met." Oliver stepped back slightly, deeply moved, understanding now clearly the meaning of true sacrifice and loyalty. He glanced gratefully toward Laura, whose presence had given him the strength to face his fears and anger. She returned his gaze warmly, quiet pride evident in her gentle eyes. Evan stood close by, clutching his sketchbook tightly, visibly shaken yet profoundly touched by Orion's bravery. Rebecca approached quietly, professionally documenting everything yet clearly moved by the extraordinary bond between man and animal. In the peaceful aftermath, Jonathan remained at Orion's side, whispering quiet words of gratitude and reassurance. Oliver watched quietly, absorbing fully the lessons of sacrifice, courage, and forgiveness now deeply etched within him. As daylight fully illuminated the clearing, bathing everyone gently in warm sunlight, Oliver knew unequivocally he'd change forever. Orion's selfless act had finally broken through every lingering shadow of resentment within Oliver's heart, teaching him that forgiveness and sacrifice were deeply intertwined. These powerful lessons had transformed him profoundly, binding them all together even stronger than before. Orion, resting calmly now under Laura's careful watch, remained a silent yet profound testament to the depth of loyalty, courage, and love shared between them all. Winter had gently settled over the Blue Ridge sanctuary, blanketing the landscape in a pristine layer of snow that shimmered softly beneath the pale sunlight. Jonathan Caldwell sat quietly on his porch, wrapped warmly in a heavy woolen blanket, his breath misting gently in the cold air. Though his recovery had been slow, his strength had finally returned, reflected now in the soft glow of health returning to his lined face. His silver hair, neatly combed, caught glimmers of sunlight, and his deep blue eyes gazed peacefully across the sanctuary he had protected his entire life. Nearby, Orion lounged comfortably, the magnificent lion fully recovered from his injuries. His golden fur contrasted sharply against the whiteness of the snow, and the faint scar on his shoulder had become a permanent symbol of his bravery and devotion. Though Orion had resumed his natural wildness, he often returned, keeping close watch over Jonathan from afar, now lying contentedly just beyond the cabin's porch, amber eyes serene yet vigilant. Inside the cabin, Oliver Grant and Laura Bennett busied themselves preparing lunch, their movements comfortable and harmonious. Oliver's demeanor had softened dramatically over recent weeks. His lean, athletic frame appeared relaxed, his sandy blonde hair casually swept back, eyes clear and unburdened. Beside him, Laura moved gracefully, her petite figure radiating quiet strength, her gentle gray-blue eyes warm and affectionate. The bond between them had grown undeniably strong, a deep mutual understanding weaving them closer. As Jonathan watched the two interact through the window, a warm sense of satisfaction filled him. The threads binding their lives, woven through sacrifice, forgiveness, and compassion, had formed a tapestry of unity and hope stronger than he'd ever imagined. A soft knock interrupted Jonathan's thoughts. Evan Clark stood nervously at the porch steps, bundled in a thick jacket, clutching his ever-present sketchbook tightly. Evan's messy dark hair stuck out from beneath a knitted hat, his glasses slipping slightly down his nose. Beside him stood Sarah Jennings, a local schoolteacher in her early 30s who had recently started collaborating with the sanctuary's educational outreach program. Sarah was slender and tall, with chestnut curls framing a gentle, expressive face. Her warm brown eyes held quiet curiosity and compassion, shaped by years of working closely with children and wildlife alike. Jonathan, Evan began shyly, stepping forward. Sarah wanted to meet you personally. She's been teaching the kids about Orion's story in the sanctuary. Jonathan smiled warmly, motioning them forward. Come in, please. It's wonderful you're sharing Orion's story. Sarah approached, her voice gentle and clear. Your story inspires the children deeply. Orion's bravery teaches lessons books alone can't. Jonathan nodded gratefully, touched by her sincerity. Animals have a unique way of teaching us about humanity. From inside, Oliver and Laura stepped onto the porch, greeting Sarah warmly. Oliver smiled genuinely, clearly familiar with Sarah from local community events. Sarah's been instrumental in getting our story out, he explained, admiration evident in his voice. Sarah blushed slightly, modestly deflecting praise. The children need heroes, human and animal alike. Jonathan chuckled softly, eyes twinkling. We're just caretakers, Sarah. Orion's the real hero here. The group laughed lightly, the air filling with gentle warmth despite the crisp winter chill. Orion, observing them quietly, stretched leisurely before approaching slowly, his powerful frame moving gracefully across the snow-covered ground. He stopped a respectful distance away, amber eyes meeting Jonathan's gaze briefly before settling down once more, content in their company. Jonathan sighed softly, deeply contented. He knew in his heart that his role at the sanctuary was nearing its natural conclusion, and this realization brought him peace rather than sadness. The sanctuary had gained new protectors: Oliver, Laura, Evan, Sarah, even Rebecca Palmer, each prepared to carry forward his legacy. Rebecca had recently secured significant funding from the State Commission to expand the sanctuary's conservation and educational programs. Tall, poised, and professional, her calm yet passionate advocacy had impressed everyone, making her an indispensable partner for the sanctuary's future. Jonathan turned gently to Oliver, voice calm but meaningful. "Oliver, it's time for you and Laura to lead here. You've both shown the strength and compassion necessary. The sanctuary's future rests securely with you." Oliver met Jonathan's eyes solemnly, nodding slowly. "I promise we'll protect it with everything we have." Jonathan smiled warmly, heart swelling with pride. "I never doubted you for a moment." Laura squeezed Oliver's hand gently, silently affirming their commitment, her eyes bright with determination and hope. A peaceful silence fell upon the porch, broken only by Orion's soft breathing. Sarah turned thoughtfully toward Jonathan. "Would you speak at the school assembly next month? The children would love to hear directly from you." Jonathan chuckled softly, eyes sparkling. "I'd be honored, Sarah." The gentle conversation continued pleasantly, deepening the quiet bonds forming among the sanctuary's caretakers. Eventually, Evan shyly approached Orion, opening his sketchbook carefully. "I drew this for you, Orion," he whispered nervously, holding up a beautifully detailed portrait depicting Orion's proud, protective gaze. The lion regarded the sketch briefly, then blinked slowly, a silent acknowledgement that brought Evan's wide-eyed grin and shy satisfaction. Later, as the afternoon sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the snowy ground, Jonathan stood carefully, stepping forward slowly toward Orion. Oliver moved quickly to steady him, but Jonathan raised a reassuring hand gently. "It's all right, Oliver," Jonathan murmured warmly, stepping slowly to Orion's side. The lion stood gracefully, meeting Jonathan halfway, amber eyes filled with profound understanding. Jonathan placed his hand gently on Orion's mane, speaking quietly yet clearly. "Thank you, Orion, for everything. Your bravery reminded us all of the power of loyalty and sacrifice." Orion leaned gently into Jonathan's touch, their silent bond palpable to all observing. Then, slowly, Orion stepped back, acknowledging their shared journey while affirming his wild freedom. Jonathan watched the lion quietly as Orion disappeared gracefully into the woods, his heart full yet at peace, knowing Orion would return, as he always did. As twilight painted the sanctuary softly, Jonathan returned slowly to his porch, smiling gently at those gathered there. Oliver, Laura, Evan, Sarah, Rebecca, each essential to the sanctuary's continuing story. Oliver stepped forward quietly, voice thick with emotion. "Jonathan, thank you for teaching us about forgiveness and courage." Jonathan regarded him warmly. "Oliver, those lessons were already within you. You just needed time to discover them." Laura gently wrapped an arm around Oliver, voice soft yet clear. "We'll carry those lessons forward, Jonathan. You've given us something precious." Jonathan nodded slowly, eyes glistening slightly. "My work here is nearly done, but I'm leaving the sanctuary in good hands, yours." They stood quietly together, hearts intertwined, eyes reflecting deep gratitude and quiet understanding. Each knew clearly now that Jonathan's legacy of compassion, courage, and forgiveness would live forever in their hearts, guiding them forward through any challenges ahead. In the quiet peace enveloping the sanctuary, Orion's distant roar echoed softly, a comforting reminder of the unbreakable bond between humanity and nature. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly, smiling contentedly, assured now more than ever that the sanctuary's future was secure, carried forward proudly by those he'd taught and loved. The story of Jonathan and Orion gently reminds us all of a powerful truth: loyalty, compassion, and forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds. Just like Jonathan, we all carry our own burdens and misunderstandings. But through kindness and understanding, we can mend relationships and create bonds that last a lifetime. In our daily lives, let's remember Orion's quiet courage and Jonathan's heartfelt forgiveness. Reach out today, forgive someone, reconnect with a loved one, or simply offer kindness to someone in need. If this story touched your heart, please share it with your friends and family. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts and feelings about Jonathan and Orion. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories about the beautiful connections between humans and animals. May God bless you all with peace, forgiveness, and unconditional love. If you believe in the healing power of forgiveness and loyalty, comment Amen below.